And with that, I'll turn now to our guest. Have a seat. Take the center seat.
All right.
We'll get started on
Thank you.
the second part of the briefing.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. We're very pleased to have with us our guest, Kaveh Madani, who is director of the University's Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, and he's also the lead author of the report Global Water Bankruptcy, Living Beyond Our Hydrological Means in the Post-Crisis Era. Welcome, Dr. Madani. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you also for attending this session and advocating and writing for water. Today, I'm here to tell you that for much of the world, normal is gone. This is not to kill hope, but to encourage action and an honest admission to failure today to protect and enable tomorrow. Today, the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health is releasing our flagship report, Global Water Bankruptcy, Living Beyond Our Hydrological Means in the Post-Crisis Era. This report, published on the occasion of our 30th anniversary, declares that the world has entered the era of global water bankruptcy, calling for a fundamental shift in how the global community understands our most vital resource, water. For decades, scientists, media, and policymakers have warned about a global water crisis. Those warnings were not wrong, but the language has become incomplete. The word crisis suggests something temporary, a shock, an emergency, followed by recovery. What we documented in this report is a different reality, though. Emerging in many places, what we see is a persistent failure state where water systems can no longer realistically return to their historical baselines. We call this condition global water bankruptcy. Let me be very clear. This declaration doesn't mean that the entire planet is already water bankrupt. Water bankruptcy is still best assessed at the basin by basin and aquifer by aquifer scale. But we now have enough bankrupt or near bankrupt systems across the world that the global risk landscape is fundamentally altered through food markets, supply chains, migration pressure, climate feedbacks, and geopolitical dependencies. So what do we mean by bankruptcy? In practical terms, it is a combination of insolvency and irreversibility. Insolvency means we are withdrawing and polluting beyond renewable inflows and safe depletion limits. And irreversibility means that we have damaged key parts of water-related natural capital, aquifers, wetlands, soils, rivers, lakes, and glaciers in ways that are not realistically reversible on human timescales or would be prohibitively costly to restore. In finance, bankruptcy is not the end of action. It is the start of a structured recovery plan. You stop bleeding, protect essential services, restructure unsustainable claims, and invest in rebuilding. In water, the logic is similar. For too long, we have been living beyond our hydrological means. We have overdrawn renewable income and liquidated natural savings that used to buffer us, like groundwater, wetlands, soils, rivers, lakes, and glaciers. And in many places, the savings do not come back on human timescales. That is why the report is not another warning, and I emphasize on that. It's not another warning about the future we might still avoid everywhere. It is a diagnosis of a world where, in many basins, the old normal is already gone. And the human toll is already enormous. Nearly 3/4 of the world's population lives in countries classified as water insecure or critically water insecure. Over 2 billion people still lack safely managed drinking water. 3.5 billion lack safely managed sanitation, and about 4 billion people experience severe water scarcity for at least 1 month each year. At the same time, the world is shrinking its water savings accounts. More than half of the world's large lakes have declined since the early 1990s, affecting nearly 1/4 of the global population that relies on them directly. Around 35% of natural wetlands have been lost since 1970s. That is a cumulative loss of roughly 410 million hectares, or almost the land area of the European Union, with over $5 trillion in lost ecosystem services. Around 70% of the world's major aquifers showing long-term declines, while land subsidence linked to groundwater overpumping affects nearly 5% of the global land area. Some food systems are now heading into bankruptcy zone. About 3 billion people and more than half of global food production are concentrated in areas where total water storage is already declining or unstable, eroding yields in key breadbaskets of the world. The economic costs are already staggering. The report identifies a growing pattern of anthropogenic drought, or water deficits that are caused by overuse or degradation rather than natural variability alone. Drought impacts already cost us around $307 billion per year. Nearly 2 billion people were living under drought conditions in 2022 and 2023. So you might ask, is this mainly a problem of arid regions? The answer is no, as the report shows. Water bankruptcy is not only about aridity. It is about the mismatch between water budgets and water consumption, and the erosion of natural capital that makes recovery possible. So what should be done? This report is primarily a diagnosis, not a cookbook of one-size-fits-all fixes. This is just the start of a new effort to redefine the global water problem. We should also be honest about something else. Expecting a wicked problem of this scale to have a simple solution is as naive as the reductionist solutions that helped get us into the current state. This is a start of a necessary shift. We have to get rid of our tendency for quick fixes that produce comforting narratives, unrealistic promises, and policies that fail in practice. But a diagnosis has implications for action. Bankruptcy management becomes real when shift from emergency responses to rules, accounting, and transition plans that match hydrological reality. Bankruptcy management becomes real when we shift from emergency responses to rules, to accounting, and to transition plans that match hydrological reality. The report outlines a transition from crisis management to bankruptcy management, which is what it is required in the new global agenda for water. Tell the truth, because we must acknowledge irreversible losses so we can stop making development promises that hydrology cannot keep. We need to protect the remaining capital. We must prioritize prevention of further damage to our remaining savings, the aquifer and the ecosystems that are still functional around the world. And we also need to decouple growth from water. We must move away from the assumption that the economic prosperity requires ever-increasing water withdrawals, a problem that has got us into this situation. We must act because water bankruptcy is a justice and security issue. The cost of the hydrological overshoot that the world is facing fall disproportionately on those who can least afford it: smallholder farmers, indigenous communities, and the urban poor. If we continue to manage these failures as temporary crises and with short-term fixes, we will only deepen the ecological damage and fuel social conflicts. Roughly 70% of the freshwater withdrawals in the world are for agriculture, much of it in the developing countries. Demand reduction is not politically feasible if it's treated as a technical exercise. It must be paired with a political economy transition. protecting livelihoods, supporting farmers with risk protection and compensation where needed, enabling shifts in cropping and practices, and critically helping economies decouple jobs and growth from ever-rising water consumption. The report also highlights a less discussed consequence of the lost normal, the stability of our institutions, treaties, and infrastructure. Many allocation rules, transboundary agreements, reservoir operating plans, and even design standards were built on historical hydrology that no longer holds. If the baseline shifts, the rules and the hardware can fail. Bankruptcy management, therefore, also means updating governance and engineering assumptions to match new realities before breakdowns turn into emergencies. The report explains why the current agenda, which is too focused on short-term crisis response, supply expansion, and incremental efficiency, has become unfit for purpose in many places around the world. It also stresses that we must protect both water as a product we allocate and the processes that produce it, the hydrological cycle and the natural capital behind it, along with the climate system, healthy aquifers, wetlands, soils, rivers, and glaciers. If we only chase the product while degrading the process, we will accelerate bankruptcy. Finally, the report argues that water is not only a risk to be managed, it is also a strategic opportunity for the world, and this is one of the major findings of the report in this fragmented world. Water is a practical, common denominator across climate, biodiversity, land, food, health, and stability. Investing in water is an investment in delivering on those agendas and in rebuilding cooperation in a fragmented world. We urge governments and the UN system to use the upcoming milestones of the 2026 and 2028 UN water conferences, the conclusion of the Water Action Decade in 2028, and the 2030 SDG deadline to reset the global water agenda, explicitly recognize global water bankruptcy where it's occurring, and move from crisis response to bankruptcy management. Our message today is not despair, it's clarity. The earlier we face the real balance sheet, the more options we still have. The longer we delay, the more we convert manageable stress into irreversible losses around the world. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn the floor over for questions. First question goes to the representative of the UN Correspondents Association, Pam Falk.
Thank you, Farhan, and thank you, Mr. Madani. Very close to our mayor's name. Thank you on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association. It's Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. If I understood the report directly, 86% of the 1.6 billion people who have sustained overdraft of water are in Asia. Is there, and it talks about science-based adaptation. What are there any overview? You said it's individually designated, but is there some overview sense of what Asia can do better to not sap the water supply? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So obviously, one of the reasons that people are there is because a lot of economies are heavily relying on agriculture, and we have a big population concentration in that continent. So it's not surprising that we see a lot of pressure on water resources, insolvency issues, and overdraft. The challenge of Asia is also the challenge of Africa and South America. It's a challenge of the developing economies in the global South. 70% of the world's water is withdrawn for agriculture, for food production. That food is not only feeding the people in those continents, but feeding the people of the global North. And this is something very important to note here. Taking water away from those people, the farmers, means unemployment and immediate tension, and chaotic situations and undermining peace and stability in those countries. So the classic solutions of recommending subsidy removals and managing your water better would not work. Instead, at the strategic level, these countries need to diversify their economies and become more industrialized and create alternative modes of livelihoods for the poor farmers. But that's not going to happen overnight. But here is the opportunity. The investment in water is investment in climate, is investment in biodiversity loss mitigation, it's investment in peace building and stability and so on. So finances that we talk about can help those countries diversify their economies and empower the farming communities. That's something we don't talk about. And we think that farmers must be recognized actually as the saviors of planet, and we must recognize their critical role in actually at the forefront of the fight on environmental issues. At the local level, of course, countries have the chance of doing better when it comes to water accounting, using better technologies, changing crop patterns, thinking about their import and export portfolio, something that is more of value and strategic importance in today's world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mariam?
Thank you for it on. Mr. Madani, as mentioned in the report, and also you mentioned it, water bankruptcy is not just an environmental issue, it's social injustice and puts a lot of people into very difficult situations. So I'm going to relate this to Iran and what is happening there right now. As you know, water mismanagement has been a problem that people have been dealing with and actually driven people to the streets many times. But this time, farmers are also angry and they took it to the streets again. And you absolutely follow the news and everything that is happening. So can you tell us like how much water mismanagement actually is impacting the protests in Iran and is the main reason for the protests and people coming to the streets?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I think the people of Iran should be answering that question, not me. But as someone who has worked on Iran matters, I would say, of course, like any other place, environmental issues, employment issues that are water related. Increasing food prices, electricity prices, or like other issues and interruptions and disruptions can create anger, can result in tension. But reducing security problems of countries or tensions like this to a water problem or a shortage episode would be irresponsible. I think even I would say I go further and say it's unethical, because I have seen recently some analysis and some even op-eds that claim that water issues drove the current situation. There is no evidence that people chanted for water. They had clear requests for water. And guess what? Iran is in its winter right now. So people came out in the street after some episodes of rain and snow. Ski resorts were open in many places, and the threat of day zero had gone away. So yes, 2 months ago the country was suffering from those issues, but it was a relief. But then we cannot single out water and say that other matters like air pollution, electricity issues, the exchange rates of currency depreciation, and other matters that did not play a role. But I think it's a lesson for the world that water plays a major role in creating stability in countries, but also a lesson for academics, media, and others who want to analyze a country, that we cannot produce simple narratives because we want to advocate for a certain, I would say, message or promote a certain message in defense of, the importance of climate change or the water issues. So I think we should be more responsible and understand the cause of people before we put out our narrative in the media.
Farnoosh?
Thank you, Farin Shamiri with the Associated Press. Mariam mostly asked my question, but to follow up, do you think that folks like yourself in the international development activist world should start making the issue of water and access to water more clear to governments as a reason that, if not is the majority of the unrest, but could spark unrest, and that could be obviously turning into a national security issue and long-term economic issue, because we know, as many of us who cover this building, a lot of things are not paid attention to until they become national security issues or until they become economic issues. Are folks like yourself or others in the field looking to show that these things eventually, with climate change and other natural disasters, that these will become civil unrest and they could have long-term implications on national security?
Thank you for the great question. We are trying. At the same time, we gotta, I think, pay attention to the fact that governments are also might be at some point tired of our warnings, and we will got to be careful about not making them sober, about the warnings. I think that we are trying. We are trying to highlight those matters. We think that water has not been recognized actually properly. It doesn't get the attention it deserves. One reason for that is that water has not been really the issue of the global north. So in academia, in some of our processes, we talked about water access. That's a primary stage of development. We talk about health and sanitation, WASH, but we didn't really talk about what's going to happen with the farmers who go bankrupt. What's going to happen with food issues and starvation and all those processes. And I think that's with the help of media, with the help of academia and activists, we can tell stories that are different and are representative of the issues of the global south. That's another thing that we have, that we issue narratives we're in Toronto, in New York, or other places that don't represent the realities on the ground. We see analyses and reports in media that misrepresent the stories and I would say causes and so on. So I think that's something that can be done. But I also warn about putting water above everything else. I think we have to understand that these are pillars of, water is a strong pillar of stability, is a strong pillar of sustainable livelihoods, and must be there. We have to protect it. We have to work on it. But prioritizing one issue over another is something that we have done, and we got to be careful about those, because unintentionally we can create competitions between the climate fight, biodiversity, loss mitigation fight, desertification fight, and so on. But if you invest in water, you're investing in everything else, and that's something we need to highlight. How helping a country improve its water system can prevent further, I would say, climate change, or can protect biodiversity loss while helping those countries immediately. I think water is a medium of aligning national security concerns with international priorities. It's the issue of left and right in North and South. And for that matter, water offers us an unprecedented opportunity.
Yes, please, in the back.
Thank you very much for the briefing. I'm Muna Autul with Al-Quds Al-Arabi. We have two questions, please. The first one is on the environmental recovery in Gaza. We are seeing a compound collapse that closely illustrates the water bankruptcy that you talk about in your different reports. And the water infrastructure and system was already very fragile before the conflict, and now it got even worse. According to UNEP, it's almost or completely gone. So this has forced people to rely even more on plastic, and also for their shelter, not just to drink. So that same plastic is clogging the few remaining drains, and it of course has a direct impact on sanitation and the very limited drinking water. Now, from your scientific perspective, when displacements and flooding and pollution and lack of sanitation collide like this, how does recovery look like?
So it's a very good question, and we hear more about the stories of Gaza these days, but a lot of other places are facing the same situation, and that's exactly why I say we should not reduce the problem to one angle. In a place like that, what we understand is without investment in creating stability and peace, it's delusional that we think that other things can be saved. We learned it the hard way. When COVID-19 hit us, we didn't speak about the environment for a while because human beings need to survive, and survival is an issue. So if there is no peace and stability in a region, then we will see the degradation of environmental resources and also infrastructure. I think that's something to understand, that when that happens, when there is no peace and stability, more and more issues emerge, and they all come together. And that's something that we have missed in a lot of security analysis. When we, in the intelligence community also, we talk about the downstream security impacts of environmental degradation. But we don't talk about the other side of the story, that if there is no peace and security, environment would be degraded. So how can you protect the environment without, if you dismiss the other element of it? And that's something to understand. That's why I say we have to make sure that our investments in these things go hand in hand. I think the SDG agenda emphasizes on that. We have to invest in all of those together. If one of them doesn't make enough progress, the other ones would be undermined. This is something has been the consistent message, and it applies to Gaza and many other places around the world.
Just a quick follow-up, please. You mentioned the SDG agendas. So a couple of weeks ago, UNDESA was here to present their 2026 report, and we asked about whether plastic specifically was included in their, across the different SDGs they tracked, including water, and the answer was no. Plastic specifically as a commodity was not included, even though there are many reports that show it's costing trillions of dollars in health costs globally. So why do you think a problem like this is still not considered as a core development and economic issue?
So I don't have the details, and it's out of the scope of this study, but it's just, I think, just this is my quick thought as a scientist, is that because it's very clear, like we don't have a shared understanding of all problems around the world. And as long as that shared understanding is not there, we cannot agree on every point. That's why it becomes extremely valuable that we use any platform we can to provide evidence, scientific evidence, that these issues matter and they are really interrelated with other issues that the world cares about. And if we do so, hopefully, I would say common sense can help us unite.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Noreen Hussein with IPS News. So many of my questions were also answered by my colleagues, but I have a couple of points perhaps that you may be able to answer. The first is on some of the points of like the global water agenda that were mentioned, and I'm just reading up the press release here, that you mentioned that about embedding a water bankruptcy monitoring in certain global frameworks using Earth observation, AI, and integrated modeling. On the matter of AI, I do wonder if you could address what is perhaps some of the environmental implications on incorporating AI in water bankruptcy monitoring, given that one of the common criticisms on AI is the environmental impact, and particularly on its usage of water. The second question I have is, I wonder if you could perhaps expand on the role that the UN system, particularly like UN partners or other multinational agencies, could play in elevating water bankruptcy to the global agenda. Thank you.
So on the first one, the role of AI, and indeed we have another report coming this year on that issue in particular. But AI is a technology. It comes with a lot of benefits, but like any other innovation, it has some cost. that are not only environmental. There are many other potential costs. The right approach is not rejecting technology, but to make sure that our excitement about adopting a new technology would not result in us dismissing some of the unintended consequences, some of the side effects. So we have to proactively study those, highlight those, and ensure that those potential consequences are part of the planning, right? In the medical world, we do a good job. If we are producing some medicine, a vaccine or something, it comes with a long list of side effects. We don't do that in the technological world. I think that's something to be changed. Of course, if a place has an issue already with there are insolvency issues and water demand is already more than the renewable budget, adding data centers in those places is I think can cause additional damages, but demands and consumption can be balanced, right? So you might be able to cut another source of consumption and then go with something that helps the local economy and development and so on. So that's something on that. But on the positive side, with what AI and remote sensing and satellites offer us is something we didn't have before. We can now help many nations around the world to do a better good job in accounting. If we don't do accounting, if we don't do measurements, we cannot manage anything. And we cannot build trust. And that's something that this era is offering us. And I think we can help the world take advantage of this opportunity for helping those nations, and also like everyone around the world, all the water stakeholders. On the role of UN, I think it's the different agencies. I think of course they have their own mandates. Water, if relevant, they can highlight how water would be relevant. And then if investment in water resources can help them with accomplishing their mission, I really hope that we see more about water and in this world and understand and appreciate the value of water. It matters that we invest in improved health and sanitation and improved access to drinking water. At the same time, it's very important for us to be prepared and for dealing with the situation that we are seeing today to prevent irreversible damages.
I think that's it. I don't believe there are any questions online, so I'd once more like to thank our guest, Kaveh Madani. Thanks so much for your briefing and for your report.
Thank you for the
Thanks.
opportunity.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.